Good morning. I'm Michael Steinman. This is Jazz Lives. I have the immense good fortune to be sitting here in an air-conditioned office in Elmsford, New York at the end of July 2015. The nicely dressed man across from me is IRV KRATKA, who the world knows more, I think, as the founder, the creator of Music Minus One for the last 65 years. And I knew Music Minus One as a kid, trying to play along with a record or two, but when I started collecting jazz records, I saw your name in the discography. So I never thought I'd be sitting across the room from you, getting ready to ask you about, among other people, two Johnsons, James P. and Bunk. So thank you for having me, Irv. That's
It's my
number
pleasure.
one.
It's my pleasure.
How did you get into this music to begin with?
Well, around 1939, as well as I can remember, my brother said, let's go uptown, we're going to hear a jazz band, or a swing band. It was a swing band, it wasn't a jazz band. We took the subway, I lived on the Lower East Side, we took the subway up to 42nd Street, walked across to the Paramount Theater, and this was quite early in the morning, about 8 o'clock. There was already a line, maybe 50 yards from the box office, already stretching down the street. We got on the line. The doors opened at 9. We rushed down to the 11th, 12th aisle, which was actually on the sight line, a level of the band when it came up. It was on a rising platform. So we were directly in front of the band at a distance of 50 feet. It was perfect seating. And that was why we went so early. My brother later went into the Navy. Maybe I don't remember the chronology of time, but I started going every Saturday on my own, and eventually came to see every major swing band of the year: Basie, Ellington, Lunsford, Claude Thornhill's band, Johnny. I'm trying to remember Johnny's name, left-hand violinist. Anyways, I saw all these bands. I saw them close up and enjoyed them. Both Dorseys were there at different times. The Ellington engagement was particularly stunning because he had Pegleg Bates, who was a one-legged tap dancer, with Lena Horne on the same bill, and Buck and Bubbles. Now, Buck Washington, it goes back to the early days of jazz recording, he was a great pianist. So all on one bill was this marvelous hour and a half. They would play the show for an hour and a half. Then a film would come on, would sit through the film and see the show again, and then go home. We didn't see the film twice. It wasn't that interesting, inevitably, but it ingrained itself. And you asked me before what got me into music specifically was seeing people like Kruper and Buddy Rich, and primarily Kruper at the time. He was the most well-known. I took up the drums about the age of 14. And I was paying like 25 cents a lesson while going to high school at Erasmus Hall in Brooklyn, which is where Streisand was going at the same time. So I was playing rudiments for a couple of years and studying at home. I tend to be very intense with whatever I take up. And that's what involved me with music. After that, I saw some private parties that Art Hodes gave in New York with a French trumpeter named Jacques Butler. And I was very impressed by that. It was like soirees or places where only 20 people showed up, but it was like our own private seeing, not like a large auditorium.
Did you have a vision of being a professional musician? Or
yes, that was my target,
okay,
to become a professional player. We used to, in my late teens, I would be at Nola's every weekend. I'd be the driving force, in fact, at calling everybody up and saying, come on down. And on one occasion, Wellstead showed up, played with us. He played with us a couple of times and drifted away. And Hank Ross, who passed away about 2 weeks ago, was our primary pianist, and a bunch of other players who were variously gifted. I mean, some were not superb, but some were very good players. One of my good friends was Effie Resnick, who was a brilliant trombonist, And he went on to play with major players in the jazz world. He was a Juilliard student, and studied intensively. And we used to have jam sessions at his home that would last through the night. So that's how enamored we were of playing music. Sometime after the NOLA in fact, I heard Sarah Vaughan at NOLA's. She was there one time playing with the band, not auditioning, and I went into that rehearsal, listened to her, I was amazed. She's just something else. I heard that Bruni's was looking for a drummer, George Bruni's, and I contacted him, and he said, come on in, and I went up to Ryan's in the afternoon and auditioned for him. I didn't make the grade, I wasn't nearly up to what he needed, but it was a very impressive thing. I used to be much of an organizer of music, and the Trenton Jazz Club contacted me and said, could I bring my band down? The band was called the Empire State Band. We'd won a contest. Bob Q, I think, was the trumpet player in the band. It was a okay band, but nothing. Notwithstanding, we were the Empire State Band, and we'd won a contest, a national contest. They said, could you get somebody like James P. Johnson to come down? I said, are you kidding? James P. Johnson? It's like resurrecting Fat Swallow. I said, well, I'll try. I called him up, and he was very gracious. He said, sure, I'll go. So we picked him up. I don't remember where we picked him up, because he lived out on the island, I believe. And he sat between myself and Effie Resnick on the far side in the back of the car. We drove 2 hours to Trenton, where he played. He acquitted himself. He was great. And it was something that had ingrained itself on me, because this was really, as well as my experiences with Baby Dodds, this was like taking me back to the very beginnings of jazz. These were seminal figures. They represented the beginning, be all and end all of good playing.
So this would have been maybe 1940?
43.
Okay.
I learned that Bill Russell and Martin Williams were organizing a band in New Orleans. They'd gone down. It was mainly Bill Russell's endeavor. And he recorded that band, and I heard those records, American Records, I think he called his label. And I was absolutely blown away. I mean, I went to Condon's, I enjoyed the Dixielanders, but I was really drawn to the New Orleans players. There's something more there for me. And it's similar to listening to the Hot Fives and Sevens and Armstrong's early work, and compared to the later white players and what they were doing. In any case, he brought that band into the Stuyvesant Casino, and I went, and I became entranced. I literally lived there. I would work a job during the day as a shipping clerk or something, and show up every night, like 6 nights a week. I came to know all the players in the band, in various ways. They were quiet people. They weren't glad-handed, so to speak. But Dodds and I got on well, and he was very gracious to me. And on one occasion, when he didn't show, I was sitting there looking at the drum set, and Bunk turned around and said, get on a chair, meaning, we have no drummer. So I sat in for one set, and then he came into the room, bustling in the room, and he, of course, washed me away because his playing was so strong and dynamic. But I was there every night studying what he was doing, and at the feet of a master, so to speak.
Now, you said that's Bunk's band with George Lewis and Jim Robinson and
Lawrence, Alcide Papageau and Lawrence Marrero.
Okay.
And Pops Forster played bass. No, Papageau was a bass player, I believe, yeah.
Okay.
And the pianist was Alton Purnell.
Okay. And later on in life, Bunk was...
And I must comment,
Sure.
that for me to remember those names
I
at
know.
my age, 89, blows me away. I find I forget my wife's name sometimes when I go home.
We won't venture into the dynamics of the brain, but it made
I have to
made
comment.
a beautiful
It's
impression on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Later in life, Bunk liked to play pop songs of the day.
Yes, that was a big conflict within his, well, not a conflict. He looked down on the players he was working with. He says, these guys can't read music. He was very severe on them. Of course, Rosen said on George Lewis for me, he was an extraordinary player. Bill Robinson was a primitive. He's a good trombonist, but he wasn't in the class of some of the people who even my friend Effie Resnick could play circles around him, but he played with gusto and in the style, so to speak. But but Bunk was very critical of the guys he was working with, and they finally got a date together. I don't know who's some named Martin Drachman or probably Martin Williams. They put a date together in Carnegie Recital Hall, which I was at, where he used other players.
This is Harold Draub.
Harold Draub, correct. Yeah. And Stone, I think, is the other guy's name. And they put a date together with I think Don Kirkpatrick on piano, and the rest of the ensemble I don't remember, but it was Bunk playing popular songs, and of course Bunk played songs like that when he went to the coast and worked with any of the West Coasters. It was a broader repertoire. They wanted him to play what he knew, and he wanted to play something more modern. It's an interesting thing.
So the Stuyvesant Casino Band is the band we hear on the American music records, and they're playing marches and spirituals and...
No, they're playing swinging music.
Okay.
Ice Cream is not a march, it's a classic. It was adopted worldwide by all bands.
Bugle Boy March and things like that. Yeah.
Played Maryland a lot, but I wouldn't consign... He was fun dancing. He had dozens of couples on the floor dancing to his music, so it was touching the right chord with people.
Yeah. No, I wasn't putting it down. I'm just saying it's a different kind of repertoire.
Yeah. Well, the standard things, and people were asking for the things they knew he'd done on the American records and recordings.
So you came to take lessons with Baby Dodds at some point?
I never studied with him. I just studied him sitting on a stand.
Okay.
I didn't really. I studied with a man named Billy Gladstone, who was the percussionist at the music hall. He was the god of all classical drummers, really, the most advanced. And at the time I was studying with him, although I never met him, Shelley Mann was studying with him. He mentioned Shelley to me, so Shelley must have just stuck out as being exquisitely talented, which we saw later. But I worked with Gladstone for about half a year. Gladstone was an inventor. He invented all sorts of gadgets, cigarette cases, cigarette lighters. He had a lot of patents to his name, maybe 20, 25 patents. And he was at the music hall. When they would play the Ravel Bolero, he was the center of attention for the next 10 minutes as he did those triplet figures, and he had this classic form. He literally was a classicist. Very few percussionists went through the motions, which was so perfect. The whole 5,000 people in the musical focused on Billy Gladstone. He was so impressive in that role. And one thing led to another. I met players in the orchestra there while going to hear him, and I ultimately used them on my first recordings for Music Minus One. They recorded the Trout Quintet, which is the most famous chamber music piece at the time. And so I'm trying to think of the right word. Just things relating to other things.
Yes, natural transitions.
Yeah.
But to get back to you in the jazz world, here you are, you're working a kind of ordinary day job, and you're going to hear gigs at night, and you're also organizing gigs.
Yeah.
You're hiring people. And at some point you said you and Joe Marini, the blessed Joe Marini, get together.
We started the business. We started a record label, and he almost immediately went into the service, and his wife said, I'll take over. But after 6 months, and I mean, we each had like $500 invested, not a very insubstantial sum.
Well, $500 in the
at that time was a lot of money.
But
after 6 months, I came to her and said that I think I'd rather break it off and not have a partner who was not there, because I was doing all the work. She was helping to the extent she could. Hannah Marini, she later divorced Joe and moved up to Woodstock. And I lost touch with her. She was a very wonderful lady, wonderful person. In any case, that was the beginning of not Music Minus One, but of a record label. I forget what of. Oh yes, Joe was studying with Simeon Bellison, the classical clarinetist. So Bellison had some records he'd made, and we put them out. So that was the first record we ever put out.
And you're on just one record date as a drummer, as far as I know. And I should have done my homework. One of the sides, I think, is Blue Tail Fly.
Yeah, with Naki Parker.
Okay. And
That was recorded at Nola's. Naki Parker was there, and the rest of the group. And we did 4 sides, I think. And Dante Ballatino, a close friend, had this label. What do you call it?
Paradox, among other things.
Paradox, and he had the Jolly Roger.
Yes.
He was taking all of the Armstrong recordings and re-releasing them and making a lot of money until somebody blew the whistle and said, told Columbia, "What's this guy doing?" You know, and they pushed him out of business. But for a while, he was doing very well. But he was serving a purpose. They weren't releasing them, so. Not that I sanctioned theft, but it was in a good cause in the sense that if they weren't available, if he hadn't done, they wouldn't be available.
Yeah, there was a whole scandal because I think in the 50s Victor was pressing Jolly Roger.
That's right.
With other people's stuff.
That's right. That's right.
You told me, though, I have 2 names on my little piece of paper here. One of them we should talk about is a fellow who blessedly is still with us. His name is Robert Sage Wilbur, that you were friendly with.
I met Wilbur when he was performing at Ryan's with Bechet. They would come in together, and the wiseacres in the audience they call him Bechet. They had some derogative name for the 2 of them. But he played duets with Bechet. It was very interesting. And he had his own group, the
Wildcats?
The Wildcats, yes. And it consists of Denny Strong on drums, Charlie Trago, Dick Wellstead gravitated to them, and they didn't have a trombonist. They later picked up Bob Milkey, who was around jamming with us occasionally, and also Blumberg. Jerry Blumberg joined them, for a recording date as a second trumpeter, and Glazell on trumpet.
Yeah.
Glazell subsequently became the president of Local 802, which blew my mind. He was such a nothing guy in terms of, his sensibilities. I thought, just a strange set of affairs, In any case, they played. They ultimately made a recording with Bechet on Columbia. I met Wilbur at that time, and I corresponded with him regarding doing some things for me. And he came in and did several records for me. Did some Music -1 recordings for saxophone, for saxes only, which was an all-star sax section with rhythm, minus the alto or minus the tenor. We had people like Jerome Richardson and some other major players at the time, and Wilbur playing saxophone. He then did an album on clarinet, which you may or may not know about.
New clarinet in town.
Correct. You know my
Yes.
library better than I do. That's a beautiful album, and he used a famous arranger for some of the songs. The name is listed. I'm losing track, but it's a wonderful recording. Did Benny Rides Again in Manhattan, Upper Manhattan Medical Group. He did something which I think Ellington did at one point. Did breathtaking arrangements. I mean, he's a very gifted young man at the time, and I don't know what else he did for me, but
There's an album, I think, called Evolution of the Blues
Yeah.
with Clark Terry on it.
yeah, we have that. That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked with Clark several times on different albums. He did an album with Tyree Glenn, and Bob Durrow was a good friend of mine, and Al Shackman, who became Nina Simone's guitarist through a lifetime. And the new film on Nina Simone, Al Shackman is sitting there being quoted, and he must be about 60, 65, 70. And I knew him as a young man, thin as a rail, married to a beautiful woman, and he's an interesting guy. I won't go into anything else, but he and Durrow were very close, very close.
Let me get you back to one person who's still with us, Bob Milkey is still with us.
He's on the coast.
Yeah,
When he
I'm-
went back to the coast, formed his own band, and I catch up with him on YouTube.
Yeah. I was sitting there maybe a year back, and Ray Shelbred was playing, and Milky was in the audience, and they were having comic byplay back and forth. Tell me about Jerry Blumberg, though. You said he was
I
a
don't remember
friend.
how I originally met Jerry, but he came in from Baltimore. He was friendly with Don Ewell, and we became very close friends. I mean, we hung out, and we jammed together and wandered the streets of Manhattan at 2 or 3 in the morning. I remember a couple of nights like that. And very gifted, very unique player, and very, very, very gifted. I hired him for my friend Dante Ballatino, who started Jolly Roger, and I and another person. 3 of us formed a group, and we decided we'd put on concerts at the Caravan Ballroom on East 59th Street. So we hired the hall for three weekends, I believe, and we brought in Bunk Johnson. Mud Carey showed up. Pops Foster was there. Chippy Hill was there. I played drums, and I think Dodds came and played drums as well. And I'm trying to remember who all the people were there.
Albert Nicholas was there.
Nicholas was there, yeah.
Okay, I think Wellsted is on a track or two, I'm not sure. I don't have the CD in front of me, but were you involved in the recording of those?
I brought in 2 brothers, the Weintraub brothers, who had disc cutting equipment. They did the recording.
Okay,
I
that's-
know them as friends, and they were jazz people.
Because blessedly that stuff is issued and we can
Yeah.
hear it. It's quite remarkable. James P. is on some of that, I think, also.
This
Yeah, no, I'm trying to half remember. So
you've encountered the name Boris Rose, haven't you?